Welcome back. Dr. Andrew Nevin is joining me right now. He's the chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers, what we know as PwC, capital P, small letter W, capital C. That's how it's written. Welcome to you, Dr. Andrew. You're laughing.
Nancy, it's great to be here. Yes, it's capital P, small w, capital C.
Yes, that's how it's written. But a lot of people mix it up and write everything capital. Good to have you on the show. Where should we start from? Let me start this way, Dr. Nevin, and permit me to, please. From the news earlier, which I did read, also from the syndrome we're having right now. I spoke from a personal perspective just a few minutes ago. My account officers in 3 banks have left the country. 2 in Canada, 1 in the UK. I don't want to mention the banks. And there are a lot of their colleagues that have done that. We're seeing that almost everyone that have the means, and what I'm also saying is that those that have the skills are the ones leaving, and the money, How troubling is this syndrome that many Nigerians now are living in droves, and the reason is that the economic condition of the country isn't favorable?
Well, I mean, we wrote the paper a few years ago on the diaspora remittances because no one was talking about the diaspora. And we kind of pointed out, and it's even more true now, that in terms of economic impact, the diaspora is having a bigger impact than oil. I mean, oil production's dropped to 900,000. We have the foil subsidy on that. So, we think of the diaspora as a positive force, and of course the chairwoman of NIDCOM is talking about brain circulation, and we've seen the case of India in the 90s and the power of the diaspora. So we're positive on the diaspora, but the fact that so many people are leaving is because of the harsh economic conditions here. So it is troubling.
How troubling is it? Because one would say it's troubling because our skilled workers are leaving to chase greener pastures, and those that don't have the means will stay back. And more of the unskilled people that will leave more of the unskilled people to Nigerian employers, to local companies. And the skilled workers are going to global companies, competing with the rest of the world abroad. The question also is that what will Nigeria lose with this before at least those people start making money and start thinking of sending home, which you talked about, diaspora remittances and all of that, or start thinking, okay, I've gone to Canada, I've gone to the US, I've gone to the UK, what can I bring back home to contribute to Nigeria's development?
But, I mean, the problem with that is that, in fact, we have almost an infinite amount of brain capacity, brain capital in this country. We have 7 million young people born a year. We probably have at least 6 million 18-year-olds. If we invested in their brain capital, we have enough brain capital to do everything we need to do in Nigeria and everything that we need to do abroad the diaspora could do. And, of course, the diaspora, the people here work together. So I have a company, a friend from the Nigerian diaspora in Waterloo, Canada. He has a company. He then employs developers that are resident in Nigeria. So there's this type of circulation. But the issue is we're not investing enough in the brain. Whether they stay or they go, we're not investing enough in the brain capital of the people. So you take the ASU strike. And unfortunately, we didn't quickly enough do an economic calculus. But I think we could all understand the impact of having 8 months disruption, 8 months, and of course it's not just 8 months because of the disruption on every side. I mean, we all know so many people have lost two years or more in their education degree. The impact of not investing in brain capital is immense. As I said, whether they go or whether they leave. We have enough raw material for here, but we choose to invest in the foil subsidy. We choose to invest in refineries that don't produce any refined product. I mean, the Dangote refinery. So, all credit to Mr. Dangote, and he really has stepped up to do something amazing. But the reality is, I think there's been about $19 billion spent, and there's no refinery. And you keep hearing delay. If we had taken that $19 billion and invested it in the brain capital of young Nigerians and creating the work in these global value chains as we talk about, we would be earning exports of $5 to $10 billion a year already from that. But instead we chose to invest it in hard assets instead of what's between people's ears up here.
Brain capital. From what you've just said right now, that it's a quick win for us to invest in brains, that is Nigerian brains. That's talking about human capital development, isn't it? Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Or what areas of investment are you looking at?
Well, to begin with, it's not, we wouldn't call it a quick win. What we
Okay.
say in the papers is the only strategy that will work, because there's a few other things going on here. I mean, everyone understands we need to export something to pay our way in the world, because there are things we're not going to produce locally for a very long time, certainly not my lifetime. We're not going to produce cell phones. We're not going to produce cars anytime soon, electric vehicles. We're not going to produce the machinery that produces these things. So we need to import, and we all understand that. Traditionally, we've relied on oil. Of course, oil per capita has been going down, but now oil is essentially almost no benefit to the country. People still say oil economy. We're only 900,000 barrels produced last month in a day in Nigeria. That's extraordinary. It was 2 million barrels a day when I came here. So oil is not producing it. So what can we export? Well, the problem is physical goods we're not competitive at. We're not competitive at for reasons everyone listening to this show, everyone in the country understands. Our physical infrastructure, our energy infrastructure, our road system, our port system, the complexity of doing business on that. And combined with that, there's something else going on. When you produce physical goods for export, not only are we not competitive, but to produce those goods is highly capital intensive. So again, to use Mr. Dangote's refinery, our calculation shows to produce one job there requires $300,000 of US dollars of capital per job produced. The problem is that capital is not going to arrive. We've been a very harsh environment for capital. I mean, you look at the headlines today, what's going on in Kogi with another part of Mr. Dangote's empire and the cement factory. You look at what's happening in the telecommunications industry. Everyone that invested in the energy industry, including my wife who started a solar company here, has lost capital on it. So people investing in hard physical assets to produce physical things are losing money on that. So they're not going to come with the capital that we need. But if we invest in brains, it turns out that you can export at a much lower cost. It only takes a few thousand, $10,000 maximum to produce one job in these brain exports. So this is business process outsourcing, it's coding for employment, it's animation. Of course, in our paper, and you have up on the screen here, we have things, these are, people have to leave physically in many cases, the sports cases, but in the music cases, people can stay in Nigeria and produce these earnings. So, I mean, it's really extraordinary. The value of a Nigerian, a world-class Nigerian in a Nigerian value chain is low. The value of the same Nigerian in a global value chain is high. So our strategy should be, let's get as many people in the global value chains as possible. But 95, 98% of them can stay in Nigeria to do this because of the way the work has changed, COVID's changed it. It's been coming a long time, but really accelerated it. I mean, even doctors can sit here and do remote consultations from here. Accounting is happening remotely. Legal services is happening remotely. So the scale of jobs that are available out there in the world, paying high wages, paying FX, is much bigger than we can supply. We just need to produce the brain capital here where people can remain in Nigeria and earn FX to buy all the things we need to import, balance our payments, solve our fiscal problems.
Now, Doctor, let me go this way and let me speak. I don't want to say as the devil's advocate now.
No, you can be the devil's advocate. Challenge us on this.
Yes, and let me say it this way. You see that Nigerians are moving to other countries, and they are moving to more developed countries, countries that have more GDP sizes. Our GDP, COVID and all of that, should be around $440 billion to $459 billion currently. Isn't it also because of we don't have, our sectors are not as developed as it should be? Or because we have the capacity to be big in all sectors, at least the competitive sectors? Isn't it also because of our GDP size isn't big? Because Dangote can be as rich as our GDP. What's his name? Elon Musk can be as rich as he is because the United States is a $17 trillion economy, so to speak. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
But that's our point. Is you know, if we want to be prosperous, we take someone with equal skill level. So let's use football as an example. I still play football at my age. It's a little bit difficult, painful, but I'm trying. So we take the best footballer in the Nigerian Professional League, and he, I think, earns, if we're numbers are right, about $35,000 US dollars. Footballers in Europe, many of them came out of the Nigerian League. They originally played in the Nigerian Premier League. And you've got Iheanacho, you've got Ndidi. I really like watching Taiwo Awani for Nottingham Forest, like to see him play a bit more. And they have transfer values of £30 million, £40 million, £50 million. So the same person in a global value chain is much more valuable. So now if we have someone in Nigeria who's a lawyer, and they can either work in a Nigerian legal value chain, where there's all these pressure on fees because of the economy, or they can work in a global legal value chain. They're going to earn much more in the global legal value chain, but they're still staying in Nigeria. And when I talk about this idea, I was at an event the other day, and the chairperson said, oh, my daughter works in Lagos for a very big international company. And she's exactly got that. The people can remain here and work in these jobs. And because of the way that work is changing, it's really unlimited. So that's what we want to see people do, is let's earn global wages with people remaining in Nigeria. And of course, those people then catalyze the whole economy. They want to buy houses, they want to support their parents, they want to put their younger siblings and nieces and nephews through school. So then that spills out and drives the whole economy on that. But we need that export base. What we're saying is the export base of oil is over. I mean, for the numbers, oil's dying, the population, amount of oil, and 900,000 is just a catastrophe. So what else are we going to export? Well, we're going to export brain capital.
Okay, so let's go back to that graphics. Let's go back, guys, to that, because it's quite important, because that's what we're talking about. You did mention, even in your report, Wizkid's Made in Lagos album generated a total of $13.4 million with over 1.36 billion streams across YouTube and other platforms. If you're taking a look at this slide, of course, our viewers are seeing it right now. Theophilus, Odion, Igalo, Tobi Amusan, that's the lady that broke the record a few times, you know, and all of, okay, take a look at Essence and all of that. You're saying from this report that these Nigerians are able to do this, but they did it abroad.
Well, the reason we did this was, of course, it catches everyone's attention. We talk about music, we talk about football, we talk about, and of course, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I mean, some people may argue he's not Nigerian because he was born in Greece, but he identifies as Nigerian. He is the most valuable export this country has ever had. I mean, he earns $42 million a year. This is not transfer value, this is a year, and I'm sure he will be $1 billion franchise. And anyone who, I mean, I love watching him play basketball. I wish I could see him live. He's amazing. The most valuable export we've ever produced. But the point of bringing this up is to show how valuable very talented Nigerians can be in global value chains. So when we take someone graduates from university here and we insert them in a local value chain, what they're going to produce is going to be less than if we could put them in a global value chain. But now we can put them in global value chains. So that has to be the strategy. That's the basic argument that we're making. And that will drive prosperity here. And it's a little bit counterintuitive too, because one of the things we wanted to talk, we do talk about is that we have an image of development that starts from, you move from agriculture to low-end manufacturing and kind of up the agricultural scale. And we're saying this is actually wrong for Nigeria because we already have so much talent, and services are actually 2/3 of the global economy anyway. So rather than go into low-end manufacturing, so if you think of an iPhone, the Foxconn factory in China, the worker in that environment is not actually earning that much. The person that's earning a lot is the Silicon Valley developer who is writing the next iOS for Apple. So what we want to say, what we're saying essentially is Nigerians should be aspiring to be in the higher value jobs. So the developers, I mean, even in this world, say a call center person is not necessarily highest up the food chain, but it's still a much higher income than people typically earn in Nigeria. And there are millions of these jobs available. So if you think of the software development world, there's about 28 or 29 million software developers globally. That number is projected to go to 42 million. I mean, we are a big share of the babies born each year. You can take a very bright 18-year-old, and in the course of a year, you can produce someone that can participate in these global value chains. So I had a conversation the other day with, because I've asked young people to reach out to me. They are reaching out to me and telling me their stories. So this particular individual was actually in computer science, but was learning quite theoretical concepts in that. But took a number of online courses for more practical developing skills. He got a job working for a global development software house on that. He was earning euros, I think, in his case. He knew all sorts of friends that were doing the same thing. And this is no organization, just an individual. Because the other thing why we put this strategy forward is, I mean, isn't it better to have a system that, in a sense, takes care of itself. Self-organizing is the term that we use, right? Well, the one thing about people is people are self-organizing. So if they give a little bit of, they will go out and find their own work. So if you think about if we had some low-end manufacturing, the complexity of finding a market and getting the goods there. But here, young people who have the skills are finding their own way into these roles on the global value chain, and it's just exploding on that. And that's what we need to build on.
Now, if you take a look at what you said, fantastic. But where my mind is also going to is that you've got to have the skilled people to do this. If you take a look at Nigeria as a whole, our skilled workers are leaving now. Some of our skilled workers are working locally for global companies. We have more unskilled and unemployable young people or Nigerians. How do we address that?
Well, but this is the
education you mentioned earlier. ASU was a strike for
but also, months. But exactly. I mean, we're making the wrong choices where we put the scarce resources that we have, government resources. ASU is just a disaster. But I think there's more and more people who recognize it doesn't take a lot of investment. I was talking to one prominent businessman in the country who really understands this issue, and he thinks you can get the investment down to, well, he gave the number $2,000 US. I don't know if that's possible, but even if we could get it to $5,000 US, $300,000 of capital required to produce a job in the Dangote refinery, $5,000 of capital required to equip a young person to insert themselves in global value chains. And the person in the global value chain is going to earn more than the Dangote refinery workers. So that mathematics is pretty compelling. And what's happened is, you know, this is not completely new. India went through it. Yeah. They export over $200 billion US of services. But they started in the 90s when the technology was not there. Yeah. Now, so many jobs can be done remotely.
Yeah. And most of them are heading even the big tech companies.
Well, that's the other thing is that, you know, the diaspora, the Indian diaspora has been incredibly powerful in linking India to the rest of the world and creating prosperity. I mean, and we put out another paper that talked about India and Nigeria and comparing them. You know, we want that model. So let's jump to the high value added services. The people remain in Nigeria, they get paid in foreign currency, they drive the rest of the economy through their spending. They're able to, you know, stay with their parents, they're able to build their communities here. That's the only strategy that will work for this country. Okay,
let's talk about a part in your report which you talked about, the, the brain capital game changers. And I'm taking a look at reversing the exodus of doctors, which I spoke about earlier. We're talking about the GVC stories, a deep look at the first movers and all of that. And I'm also seeing the example of India, which you mentioned earlier, and Kenya. Can you really dissect this for me quickly?
Well, the medical professionals is interesting, and you know, it is a concern because you need medical professionals in your own country on that. I think what we would say about this is, again, there's enough young people who are smart enough to become medical professionals, whether it's nurses or technicians or doctors, et cetera. I mean, there are other countries that have faced this issue, and what they've done is they have realized that they need to train a lot of doctors, some of whom are going to go abroad and send remittances, some of whom are going to remain in country. And you know, a very good example of this is Cuba. They recognize they're going to lose doctors, so they train twice as many doctors as they need. The ones that go send money, connect to the rest of the world. The ones that stay serve the medical needs. And of course, if the whole country gets more prosperous and better conditions, people are going to be more likely to stay. But the issue for us is not trying to restrict the diaspora or immigration. The issue for us is it's much cheaper just to provide this brain capital, this education, than try to build the Dangote refinery or build out some of the physical infrastructure on that. And yet we still are investing in the wrong things. But specific on the medical issue, we should be training a lot more nurses, a lot more doctors. Now, I think one other issue that's starting to rise up on everyone's agenda is, can we partner with some of the countries where we send people to create a system that is more effective for both parties? So to give an example, many people leaving for Canada today, different professions, but including medical professionals. Could we partner with the Canadian government and the healthcare system there to say, okay, they'll help train 200,000 nurses, 5,000 of them, 10,000 may go to Canada, but we still have 190,000 here. That sort of partnership is something I think that we need to start to examine so we get both effects happening at the same time. But it all comes back to, we have the raw brain capital, the raw brain power in this country. If we just invested in young people, they're going to find the roles around the world, whether they're in Nigeria or elsewhere, that support prosperity in this country.
Now, okay, we've talked about India. How about Kenya, the Kenyan experience?
Because, well, Kenya, of course, is a smaller country, and you tend to think of them as not so advanced in focus on education as many parts of Nigeria are, and investment in it. But actually they've made real leaps and bounds. They're also going down this strategy of exporting services. So they can export some physical things. They're doing very well in coffee and horticulture, et cetera, which we have struggled with. So but in addition, they now are also exporting more and more of these services, so the BPO, the call center. I mean, one thing, maybe people haven't heard this, I've read this, that you know, in the United States, there's a thriving market to cheat as a college student by just having someone else write your essay. But of course, there's software now. You can't reuse the same essay, so everyone has to do a new essay. But the people who actually write those essays apparently largely are in Kenya, because they're smart enough, well-educated enough. So that's an export of brain power. You know, the person staying in Kenya, they're earning US dollars, doing something that's effectively illicit on that, supplying a U.S. college student with a paper. But you know, they have the brain power to do it, and the young people who are educated enough to do it. So, you know, not that I want us to start to write papers for other people, but there's enough legitimate work out there, like the chart you have up there, that we can absorb. You know, we can absorb it. We put out the number 2 million young people, and if we had 2 million young people inserted in these sorts of global value chains, the entire economy would be transformed. Every industry would be transformed, because we'd be building houses, we would be driving entertainment, people would be supporting healthcare and education for their parents and others, as I mentioned a bit before.
Now, this is even the next stuff I want to talk about. Can we quickly take that slide, guys, quickly? Because what you've also done is you've been able to itemize where we can actually, the skills required. You take a look at call center outsourcing, animation, BPO, legal insurance. What's that? What's BPO?
A business process outsourcing.
Okay, business process outsourcing. Then programming. Can you just take us through this? Are you saying that we can begin to take a look at some of those things? Because we're even having young people even do animation.
This is happening. So call center outsourcing, I mean, I'll mention, it was mentioned in the paper, Outsourced Global is the most successful outsourcing company in Nigeria, started by the amazing woman Amal Hassan.
Yes,
it's based in Abuja and Kaduna. It's got over 1,000.
Wonderful job.
So you know, they do, and I've been to the physical. They have a number of physical locations, but I've been and I've watched them do the call center outsourcing. They have clients in the U.S., clients in Canada, clients in the U.K. And as you can see on the graphic, it's a little bit of a lower end skill requirement, so the pay is a bit lower, but we're still a good pay by Nigerian standards. Then you move up the value chain, so animation and gaming. So what happens on this is these are all teams that are working together. And if you think, for example, of animation, and Japan's very advanced, or Korea's very advanced in producing these anime movies, but now they're outsourcing more and more. But Indonesia's benefited from that. Young people in Indonesia can do it at a lower cost, but still a high wage versus Indonesia. Then we move to business process outsourcing. And what we're finding, as I said, is many things can be done remotely that you thought had to be done physically. So legal services, and you know, Amal's company, Outsourced Global, offers legal services. And in fact, the legal services, they don't even come to the office. They actually themselves work from home. So the Outsourced Global doesn't have to go to the expense of a physical office for that. Insurance is happening. Accounting services, I mean, obviously as PwC, we need to think about this too. If, you know, how do we participate in these global value chains remotely? We can have associates here who do work for other places, and you know, we're earning FX for the country. But it also ties into this immigration, because of course it would de-risk it for someone may want to go, or may want to, maybe what happens is we organize a system where they can work with a Canadian company doing Canadian accounting work. Everyone can get to know each other. They can know a little bit about Canada from abroad before making the decision to JAPA. And of course it would then also help the Canadian immigration officials, because on their resume they've worked 2 or 3 years actually for a Canadian company. They know a lot about it on that. So I think that there's a way that these things fit together. And of course we have, as I said before, software developers, the programming, which is the largest number that we've put out, 1.5 million. But I mean, that's eminently doable. There's going to be 42 million. We produce 7 million babies a year here, a significant share. And one of the things that is happening is, including Outsourced Global and a few others, they have figured out how to take someone with a high school or a bit of university education and in a year or less turn them into programmers that can fit into global value chains. So that's extraordinary. Okay.
Doctor, we have to go now, but of course for the conclusion for the report, and let me just take our viewers through this. Your conclusion is that the Nigerian population is young and vibrant. Brain exports is a solution that can unlock the potential of this dynamic asset class. PwC is also of the view that one takeaway is that Nigeria needs to start treating education as an infrastructure for development and not a social service, especially digital education, as screen-based interactions have become as fundamental as reading and writing. Brain export workers may be complex for the government to tax directly, still the advantages outweigh that concern. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you, Nancy. It's always a great pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Great show.
Thank you. That's the much we can take. PricewaterhouseCoopers, the report on Nigeria's brain exports. I think this should be in the hands of government agencies and all of that. Doctor, I hope, of course, it's online, so, but I hope you can interact at least with government so that they can take a look at this and read through. And for those coming in, 2023, very crucial year. That's the much we can take. I've been speaking with Dr. Andrew Nevin, who is the chief economist at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I hope you enjoyed our package today. Join me again tomorrow. Another guest, another topic. I am still Nancy in Nigeria. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Be the best you can be and be that change that you want to see. Bye now.